is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I'm here in Acapulco, Mexico, and I have coming in from Albuquerque, New Mexico, Breaking Bad Country, Dan Dowling. And he's a burgeoning writer. He's had some of his writings on things like The Activist Post, which is a website I really like. He's really into relationships and all sorts of really interesting aspects and takes on anarchy that I haven't heard before, and I think it's going to be really interesting. He's also going to be a speaker here at Acapulco talking about some of these topics. So yet another person coming down to the anarchist mecca in Acapulco. Before we get into all of that, Dan, I have to ask you, how did you become an anarchist?
Geez, this is kind of a funny story. Well, we're all born anarchists. We're not born with an artificial government until we internalize it. But I became an anarchist by being rejected by a girl that I really liked who was super libertarian. And we really liked each other, but I was at a different point in my internal evolution, and I was more looking for, just like a comfy, cozy relationship. And she knew a little something that I didn't, and I experienced the rejection. I was like, how? It gave me pause. It gave me some respite from like eternally trying to chase something outside of myself and look for fulfillment outside of myself. And after that point, I mean, it really just opened the floodgates for internal alchemy. And when you do enough research, you realize that the state is the progenitor of all evil, or that idea. That broken and dead idea. So, yeah, I've always been anarchist. I've never subscribed to any party line, and I actually couldn't really call myself an anarchist until I became an activist. So I think those two terms are intrinsic, and you can't say, well, I don't like what the left is doing, I don't like what the right is doing, and just not sit back and do anything and say that, you're a voluntarist. You're not volunteering your time to help change the world, to actually make a difference. So it was when I started writing, actually, and taking it upon myself to reach out to young men and women to help them achieve some sort of internal alchemy that helps transcend the muck that we've found ourselves in from the state.
Well, that's interesting. That's the first person who said they became an anarchist because a girl broke up with them.
No. We were just friends, and we remain really, really good friends to this day. And I actually shot her off an email at the beginning of the year, just telling her how much I thanked her and how actually crucial that was in my own development. And yeah.
That's very interesting. So I suppose since that period, since you knew her or she was talking about these topics, you looked into it more and more. Were there any sort of things or, for example, books or websites or YouTube videos that sort of made it all click for you?
Ralph Smart is, his name doesn't precede his reputation. He's got it going on. He's the infinite waters diving deep guy. You may have heard of him, but just really common sense, and he gives enough time and space in his teaching to actually be able to absorb it. So it's sort of Zen-like. But apart from that, it was really just a driving and burning desire to not go along with the lies anymore, and to actually be fruitful in truth. And I'm sure all about it. I mean, it's an adventure. You never ever stop. You're always constantly learning, and especially when you're surrounded with good people. My family, especially my mom and little sister, they're amazing, deep thinkers, and they're Christian, which I'm not. But through a deep relationship with them, I've been able to really learn how to respect other people's thinking, and also realize the similarities and the truths that can be found in pretty much every single religion. So, yeah, respecting other people's religions and opening up my awareness to them and being humble and just looking to everyone as a teacher. I think that would be the biggest aspect, including myself.
Yeah, very interesting. You definitely you've mentioned the word Zen and a lot of times about inner self and all these sort of things. So it's quite obvious that you're quite into this sort of aspect of things. And I know one of the topics that you talk about is the relationship between government and people. And why don't you tell us a little bit about some of your thoughts on that?
Well, the relationship between government and people, it's kind of a difficult topic to address because I don't think government actually exists to have a relationship with. It's this, I call it a thought bubble. It's a figment of our imagination. We have all of these ideas, and some of these ideas can actually balloon into the consciousness of God or love or the universe, whatever you want to call it. It's real, and it magnifies our potential. It magnifies our thoughts. Nothing ever changes. So we have a thought, and we devote it to an idea like compassion or love or forgiveness, those types of things. When we devote it to those real thought balloons, I like to call them, they cross-mogenate. I'll use a term from Austin Powers. It's not static, so it comes back threefold or ninefold or whatever, but that's where creativity comes from. Creativity comes from truth. Love is creative, so when you devote an idea, when you devote your thought energy to what I like to call a moral vacuum, there is no God consciousness in there. It's a false idea, but it's able to exist so that you can have free will to make the right choice, to choose to love. And so you devote your thought energy to a moral vacuum like government, and you lose a lot of your energy, but it doesn't just stay the same. Nothing can ever stay the same. The universe is ever expansive. So, and if it's not connected to good, it's going to go through all these transmutations and variations, and it'll come out much the same way that creativity does. But rather than creativity, it actually doesn't create anything. It's typically prophylactic. Anything prophylactic is a calling card of evil, call it what you want, but it's not love. And so I like to call it a contrivance. So you're either creating or you're contriving. And I believe government is one of the primary contrivances that people just regard as, it's a touchy subject because it seems to be all encompassing. It's ubiquitous among people's lives. And so it's a very difficult topic to even broach because people associate so much of their self with government, and it's actually an ego thing. You can't believe in this government and the determination of your own government over others without having some amount of chauvinism. So it's a pride thing, and when people hear concepts like anarchism or voluntarism, they're curious, but they like to take that opportunity to flex their pride in government, and so.
No, it's very interesting. And by the way, you keep touching the table there, and it's affecting the microphones. So if you can, just try not to bang the table too much. But yeah, no, it's very. Yeah, get some mittens. Very interesting. I've been getting into all kinds of facets of thinking. I've begun meditating over the last few months. It's brought a lot into my life. It's been amazing. I've been thinking about energy, and the more I think about it and the more I read about it, it's really interesting and exciting to think about how all this stuff works. And just the other day, they had the State of the Union with Barack Obama, and I didn't. And I didn't watch it because, for a number of reasons, it's actually sort of my job to watch it. I write something called the Dollar Vigilante. I'm supposed to pay attention to all these things and see what all these criminals are saying. But to me, it's like if I'm giving them my energy by giving them my attention and my focus. And so I try not to do that too much. And yeah, there's all these sort of energy sort of things, and what you send out comes back to you, like you said, threefold or tenfold, and it can come back good or bad depending on your intention, and all this sort of interesting, very interesting stuff. I've been reading one site that I've been reading more and more lately. I don't know if you've read this, Zen Gardener. Really interesting aspects on all this stuff, and it actually all ties into anarchy. It all ties into peace, love, and anarchy. It ties into truth, and that's another thing too. I've been having a hard time telling the difference between the liberty community and the truth community. And, the truthers are the people trying to find out the truth about what's been happening and things like 9/11 and things like that. But it's all sort of tied together in a sort of a weird way.
Yeah. Zen Gardner, I've actually read a really good article about humor and just how absolutely necessary it is and how it's a hallmark of humanity. Yeah, he covers a lot of good topics. The one thing that should tie all of these communities together is action, and action can only come from space, from time and space. Everything comes from the void. If you hear about really amazing martial artists, when they're in the void, every movement becomes a prayer to them, and so they're not actually thinking with their brains. It's a spiritual driving force to act. And so I determine the utility and the goodness of a movement by its action and how it motivates people to act. And you were talking about energy and not wanting to devote too much of your consciousness to a certain idea, in hopes of not allowing it to propagate. But that's somewhat of a trap, actually, and it's propagated by the New Age movement, which has its roots in Satanism. And it's pretty funny how some of these prominent Satanists have just forthrightly said, this is ours. Like, people are buying this up. Like, it's tied into all of the conscious communities. And I myself went along with it for a couple of months, during earlier phases of my spiritual journey. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that we're, as a planet, we're on the precipice of something either really great, a transition from one way of living, an ego way of living, to a compassionate way of living, where all life is recognized as sacred, and where we're not in this ridiculous perception deception. But the more I looked into these philosophies, the more I realized that there was absolutely no way they could be founded in truth, because so many of them were saying, people, don't worry, you just be you just smile a lot, don't pay attention to those monsters under your bed, they don't exist. And
Now, I hear what you're saying on that, and you brought up perception deception. Have you paid attention to David Icke?
Yeah.
Because he uses that term, and he actually brought that up as well. I've been watching a lot of David Icke stuff. He's really onto a lot of things, in my opinion. He's got a lot of interesting ideas about what's really going on. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were we just talking about? About the new age movement. Yeah, he doesn't like them either, because he's like, well, you can't just sort of sit there and ignore problems. But that's not what I'm saying when I said I didn't want to watch Barack Obama. I don't want to devote too much of my time and energy to listening to these people, especially when I know exactly what they're going to say anyway.
That's a completely different thing. Yeah,
right.
And I feel the exact same way. Someone was actually talking to me about the address, and I said, listen, man, I just don't care. I don't care, because I know that anything that can come from those largest channels of influence. At this juncture in the negative feedback loop that is government, it starts as a very small and innocuous thing, and it's based on one single lie. Everything else is truth, otherwise no one would be able to buy it. But the single lie is that you're not capable of governing yourself. And after so long, after so many revolutions and iterations, it expands and it becomes this warbly, just laughable behemoth to what it is today. And so everyone says, oh, it's obvious that this thing is bad. This thing is bad. We must defenestrate it. We must get rid of it and then get a new one. And so
Right.
the cycle perpetuates itself. Sorry, I just went on a little bit of a tangent. But yeah, it's at this point in that cycle, there is nothing in the largest of channels of influence that hasn't been co-opted and inverted to dampen people's consciousness, to purchase people, after they buy it.
Yeah.
But I totally get what you're saying about just.
Yeah, and it's amazing how everything's inverted. And you brought up Satanism. I don't know who's doing it or why they're doing it or what kind of energy this is that's doing it, but everything is just being turned upside down. There's a great quote, I can't remember exactly, but it's like the medical system destroys health, the school system destroys education, government destroys freedom.
DHS destroys families.
Right, yeah,
destroys
everything.
Food security, it promulgates.
Yeah, it's like it's all been inverted. And yeah, you brought up also religions. One of the things I've noticed, I've been just looking into all this stuff. I've never really looked into any of this before. I've been mostly just going my own path and trying to learn my own things and have my own interests, which have included things like finance and economics and politics, and trying to figure out how the world
That's something
works.
I could learn a lot more, and I'm looking into delving into the Dollar Vigilante and some of your other websites.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time, like more than a decade, looking into all that stuff. So I know it pretty well now. And then I was like, there's still something I don't know. There's some stuff going on that I know it's happening, but I can't figure out why or what's the real cause or what's really happening.
Inchoate sense.
And
You just had that
What's that?
inchoate sense, just something.
yeah, I just sensed that there's much more that I don't know, and I'm just always seeking truth and seeking knowledge, just constantly. I'm so curious about everything. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what life is. It makes no sense. And you brought up religion, and one of the things I've noticed about religion, especially things like Christianity and things like that, is they talk a lot, even in the Bible, about how evil collectivism is, and they say do not allow any man to rule you, in essence, although that's been inverted now too. They invert everything. But it's kind of interesting because that's like a really old book. I don't know how old. I'm still looking into all this stuff. It's really interesting. But they were warning about that stuff a long time ago, and we still have these problems today because people still allow these government ideas, and government, the word govern is to control, and meant is mind. It's essentially mind control of populations. And so very interesting stuff. Like we could talk forever about all these angles on what's really happening, and spirituality and energy and connectedness and truth, and there's a lot more to it. And I've been really just reading and researching constantly on this stuff and meditating and thinking, and I'm fascinated by it all.
Yeah, the inversion of relationships is one of my biggest and most critical points in writing and reaching out to young people, especially because relationships are regarded as portals to pleasure rather than gateways to life. And so this very sacred thing has been chased so haphazardly, and so it's been so inverted, like you said, and something so beautiful and glorious. And what's the most important thing that you could possibly do as a human? To me, and this may be coming from a Catholic background, growing up in a Catholic family, but creating another life, another man or a woman. Like we have infinite potential, and so to create another vessel for infinite potential is it's a sacred honor to me. And taking that view has changed my life completely. I mean, it's been a 180, and it takes you from the external to the internal, and then it makes you question all of your ideas. It makes you question all of your motives when you start looking at life as being completely sacred. And as it's a supreme responsibility. And so just chasing any relationship haphazardly and looking for that external pleasure, that's been it's impossible for me to entertain anymore. And I find great satisfaction in being able to open up younger people's minds to different ideas. And one of the big things is that antagonistic relationship between government and family, and it's a really it's very poignant, because everyone can see that government now is, it's at that point where it's so big and massive and warbling and it's out of control, and no one can deny that because of all of the mass murder, all of the extortion, all of the corruption in political offices. No one can deny that. So relating government to family, it has supreme utility for me. The antagonistic relationship, I mean, you can see how families are being attacked on every single front now. I mean, there are financial sanctions even for being married in Obamacare. People are divorcing. People are legally divorcing just so that they can have that financial incentive.
Yeah, there's been a long period where it's been a focus to try to destroy families, and a lot of it was sort of communist related, where they had this idea that, and it's sort of fascist communist, that the most important thing is the nation, or the country, or the people. And by doing that, they want people to they want to break the bonds between families, and we see that all the time. And they started doing it a long time ago with central banking, which really destroyed the economy and still is to this day. And it actually forced women into the workforce more, whereas before a lot of them would actually stay home with the children, which is quite healthy. But now they've made it so people are so impoverished that the women has to go out and work, and then they put the kids usually in some sort of government daycare, and then of course the kids are very young age put into government indoctrination camps, and now they're even talking about 2 years old they want to start doing in the U.S. Vladimir Lenin said that if you give give me your child for 4 years, the seed I plant will never be uprooted. Now in the U.S. they have 12 years, and they're trying to make it even more. They're trying to get them into these indoctrination camps at 2 years old, trying to drive the creativity out of them by just making them memorize, turn them into little robots, essentially little slaves, and just drive the creativity out of them. And there was a study done in school systems, and they asked kids in every grade, on a scale of 1 to 10, how curious do you describe yourself? And grade 1 it's like 10, grade 2 it's like 9. It just keeps going down until it's like grade 12, and it's like nothing. I just want to drink and do drugs, and I want to just sit at home and watch football because I just hate my life after 12 years in prison. The whole system is built that way. And there's so many things happening. We're going to have an Acapulco things like unschooling, where you don't even send your kids to school. You don't even force them to learn anything, because kids are naturally curious. Kids are the most amazing little sentient beings, and thanks to the system, by the time they're 10 or 15 or 20, they're so destroyed by the system that they're not creative anymore. They're not interested. They're not curious. They're not creating. They're not doing anything really, except for they've been so destroyed by the system. So yeah, all these systems in place are terrible, and they're all sort of coming to an end now, hopefully. I think, I don't know about you, but this seems like something changed in the last decade or so, especially with the internet. It seems like there's this awareness or consciousness rising, and people are starting to become aware that they're living in a prison, which is really good, because the worst prison is one with bars you can't see, because then you don't even think you're in prison, and a lot of people don't. So you ask most Americans, oh, we live in the land of the free, and it's like, oh my God, not even close. So yeah, there's so many things like that.
Yeah, I was glad to hear you talking about children and about the example for us. You know, we can't hope to progress as adults if we haven't even experienced childhood to the fullest. And we're not supposed to ever, you know, graduate from childhood. We're supposed to add to childhood. We're supposed to add all of these aspects, but never take away the constant questioning, like you were saying, never taking away the playfulness, never taking away just a belief, like belief in something. So you find so many people who are apathetic. They're completely bogged down by all of these things. They forget to plant the flowers. You know, they're constantly pulling up the weeds, and they're forgetting to plant the flowers. Actually, it's a good quote that I heard recently reading some of Matt Stone's articles. He's a really, really great health researcher. But yeah, I one example that I harken back to in my writings a lot is, you know, how much we have to learn from children. They'll ask the pertinent questions. You know, if a mom and dad are divorcing, they'll ask, well, why can't you just love each other, assholes? And you know, adults will confound everything and say, oh, well, it's more complicated than that. No, it's not. You know, love is an action. Love isn't just this nebulous feeling, and kids know that. If you love somebody, you will show it, and if you don't, then you're lazy, and you know, you've forgotten how to be a kid. But one.
Yeah, kids are amazing. I've got a 8 and 10-year-old, and some of my most profound conversations are with them, and I'm the one listening.
Yeah, it's amazing how anybody could possibly want to stifle children. It doesn't make sense to me. And you know, there's, as far as destroying the family goes, back to that topic, just devaluing life. That's a huge principle in statist mentality. So in relationships, it's not about wanting to express and unify your love and create more consciousness to share with, to be fruitful with. It's about this might bristle some hairs on a lot of people, but the whole prophylactic movement, birth control.
Prophylactic, isn't that a condom?
Yeah, birth control as well.
Oh, okay.
That's been a huge factor in dissolving the family, because the family is.
And feminism, all these things, that was started by the Rockefeller Foundation. Yeah, they're trying to destroy the family. They're trying to destroy life. Now we have Agenda 21 with the UN, where they're trying to reduce the population of the world by like 95%.
One of the main focuses was that I wanted to talk about was the antagonistic relationship between families and government, and actually get to the bullet points of it. But yeah, just to finish up really quickly about birth control and about, you know, prophylactic means to control family. It's the difference between internal and external. External is government. External is trying to, on every facet. You know, it's a futile effort, because especially as a nation expands, so does the sphere of government. And if you're trying to attempt to control every single aspect from the outside, you're just going to be running around until your head spins, until your hair turns gray. But the internal is family. It's doing things out of a spirit of voluntarism and connectivity. Where government takes, families give freely. There's no taxation, but it's pure love. Where government forces, externally, families guide with benevolence. Whereas government enforces death to make ends meet, families encourage creativity and reverence for life. And whereas government cultures sterile isolation, families create richness in unity and appreciation for the unique talents of all those surroundings. So I regard government as a false construction of family. And I regard family as the only true and real form of government. And that's only until a child fully matures, until 18 or 25. And after that point, it's completely voluntary association. And if we can model our communities after the family, where it's just completely gifting, and people do have their roles, but at no point in time is anybody coerced to do anything. If you just have a series of interconnected families, you have strength. And the gift is in the giving. And a lot of times people will they'll try to prop up government by saying, well, who's going to take care of everybody? Who's going to pull together all these resources to feed the homeless, to shelter the homeless, and to provide all these things that people need? And I really like to focus that question on a family,
Well, not to mention that in the U.S. now, it's becoming illegal to be homeless. It's becoming illegal to feed the homeless, all done by the government, of course. So everything's just a lot of things that people think they need government for is clearly the government is the exact opposite of what they think they want it for. It's actually doing the opposite thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people like to use the dearth of evidence for full-fledged anarchist nations as a point to drive home, like, I don't want to hear about anarchism because there's never been an anarchist state that has had any success. And people will go so far as to say that, and all anarchist communities have fallen under the realm of some psychopath, and it's led to famine and death. And wait, so you're talking about anarchism or government? Because that's literally what happens to every single government. But even if that were true about anarchism, not really having any solid evidence for these functioning communities, for these functioning nations, it's not about a nation. And this is something that I really try to drive home to people who are not really familiar with the concept. It's not about a nation. It's about a family, and it's about a community. And there's not going to be that overarching sense of, okay, well, we're clearly Spanish and we're anarchists, and the English, they're whatever, but it's not like that at all. And people have a really hard time getting out of that patriotic mindset. It's just about being a person, being part of a family, being part of a team, and living a gifting existence where you're not thinking about how you can protect yourself at the expense of all of these other people. It becomes more like how. And that's boring. It's so boring, that prophylactic nature of association. What's really fun, what's really exciting, and this is the biggest the biggest locomotive force behind the alternative community right now, behind voluntarists and libertarians. They're actually working on something. They're creating something. They're creating these communities. They're creating these ideas. They're creating these new types of technologies. And through that creation and through that association, through creation for love, that's where all the excitement is. It's that's where the joy of life comes from. That's where you're planting flowers. That's an aspect where you don't have to worry about all of these, all of these myriad roots and weeds. Like it's government's like the hydra. You chop off one head and three more sprout up. But if you can plant that flower, and trust that it will blossom and grow and interconnect with more flowers from different planters, you're going to choke out any sort of weed just by the nature of your creation. And you're not going to have to worry about that. And so all these problems like chronic stress, chronic anxiety, that's a prophylactic problem. I think that's a really startling side effect of government, is that people are taught to be so constantly worried about all of these things, all of these external things. And they just forget that, if they joined a sport team, if they joined a gardening club, if they did something, they wouldn't be thinking about those things. And as there's one point that people try to make when defending government, and they bring up the rapist scenario, like the baby murderers. I don't know if you've come across that.
Oh, of course, I've heard every argument for statism.
Yeah, but I like to liken a bunch of voluntarists or anarchists convening like out of creation. I like to allude to a pack of lions, like what baby rapist, whatever lecherous thieving person, who's going to come attack a pack of lions with really sharp claws? I mean, our sharp claws, we build things with, we create and we enhance our experience. But I can't see a very large group of intelligent people forming together and just having their asses in the air and heads in the sand, and I'm a writer. I'm not a self-defense expert. I'm not a munitions expert or security expert, but I know that there are a lot of those types who do exist. And
Oh, of course, and they're always better. Private security is always better. Anything to do with government is always the exact opposite of what people think is good. Most of the rape and problems is all through the status system and through the child protective services and all these things. So yeah, I totally agree, and it's going to probably take a while before we can get to this sort of better world. But if each of us are kind of working at it all the time and trying to improve ourselves and trying to improve the lives of people around us, that's the way we do it. And we should cut this a little short because people have ADD nowadays. And but down here at Anarchapulco, we're going to be talking about a lot of this stuff. And like you pointed out, we're doing a lot of stuff. We're trying to build new systems, better systems, more nonviolent systems like Bitcoin. That's changing the entire world of money and banking, taking it away from a centrally controlled communist style thieving and destructive system to something that is actually personal, something you can be your own bank with Bitcoin. So all these kind of amazing things. It's going to be really amazing. And you're coming down. A lot of people are coming down. It's February 27th to March 1st, right here on the beach behind me in Acapulco. It's called Anarchapulco. Yeah, if you're listening on the radio, it's just ANARCHAPULCO.com. If you get even close to that, you'll find it.
One real quick thing, Jeff, before I get off. We're talking about how everything government does is inverted. And so all of their plans to help the community and all their attempts to feed the homeless, it's actually the opposite. They need the homeless so that they can justify the police state and keep people under constant control and under constant tabs. And so people ask, who would do that? Who would fill in those roles? And, how many churches can you think of, that their sole mission is to feed the hungry? All the donations they take in, aside from keeping their missions up, is to feed the homeless and to clothe people and to shelter people. So that aside, one thing I wanted to make waves with in the anarchist community is a mass scale food drive, and under the name of Bananarchism. And it's really simple. You know, there's so many homeless people who are so stressed out, and what's the first thing, you know, when you get anxious, when you have anxiety, you have stomach issues. So all of these organizations and drives, they have these really good ideas, but I think the implementation is really not so effective, because they're feeding them all of these hard to digest foods. So one of the most complete foods on the planet are bananas, and so I'm developing this recipe with peanut butter, with gelatin, with coconut oil for the saturated fatty acids and the gut healing properties, to make this really simple package that anyone could deliver en masse. You know, like one person could feasibly feed 100 people at a time and actually provide outstanding nutrition to them that they could digest. And so that's one aspect that I'm working on, that I would hope to be able to expand on in Acapulco.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of anarchists doing a lot of charitable work, trying to help people. Jason King of Sean's Outpost was on Anarchast. I think they have fed over 100,000 meals to homeless people in Florida, even though it's illegal to do because of the government. Even here in Acapulco, there was a flood, and we went down and we had donations from anarchists around the world, a lot of them in Bitcoin, and we really helped to save this community that got wiped out by the flood down by the river. Down by the river. And
how recent was that?
That was a couple of years ago. You could just look it up. Probably just put Anarchist Recovery Center Acapulco, and we had our signs up and everything. And we were out there, and I was asking people, and, you know, these people just had their houses just washed away, their whole lives just washed away, their whole material life washed away. And they were kind of in shock, obviously. And I said, have you heard from government or anybody here and to help you? And they're like, no, nothing. And it was just all of us were helping out there, medical supplies and food and things like that. So and you can just imagine, if we didn't have all this theft from government and central banks through the theft of inflation, how much more wealth we would have. It'd be such a much more peaceful and prosperous world. There'd hardly be any real homeless people. There'd hardly be any really destitute people. It's all caused by government. But we should leave it there. So Dan Dowling will be down here at Acapulco. Really interesting guy. Lots of interesting insights into all these things. There's going to be many more people like him. So check it out, February 27th to March 1st, right here on the beach behind me. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
This is Anarchast.